Hello everyone. Welcome to 90-Day Truth Files. Real stories, real truth. Subscribe now. He didn't expect her to say it with that much force. Not after everything she's already swallowed. Jenny stood still, face blank, voice cold, and said the words Sumit never thought he'd hear again, but this time without a crack in it. She was leaving. Not in the way people yell at Midaru, not with drama or empty threats. She meant it. And the silence that followed, that was the sound of someone done begging to be chosen. For a second, Sumit just sat there blinking, trying to replay the last few seconds in his head like he'd misheard her. But Jenny didn't flinch, didn't soften, didn't correct herself. She stared right at him and said it again. She was going, "If you wanted to stay, fine. But she wouldn't survive one more week like this." Welcome to TLC Drama Live. I'm Sabrina. And if you've ever felt trapped in someone else's version of love, this one will hit hard. If you're new here, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the raw truth behind the drama. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Jenny's finally serious this time, or is Sumi about to reel her back in again? Because here's the thing. Jenny didn't snap out of nowhere. You could see this coming if you were really paying attention. The forced smiles, the way she lowered her voice when Sumit's parents were around, the way her whole personality shrunk the second they moved back into that house. This wasn't an impulsive outburst. This was pressure finally cracking. A quiet erosion stretched over months until there was nothing left to hold in. And when that moment came, when the dam broke, it didn't come with tears. It came with a calm, terrifying finality. Sumit wasn't screaming. He wasn't blaming her. But his face said it all. He thought they were managing. He thought surviving meant progress. He thought if Jenny had stayed silent this long, it meant she was adapting. But that silence was suffocation. And now he's watching her breathe on her own for the first time in weeks. And it scares him more than any argument ever could. When someone stops fighting with you, that's when you should worry, because it usually means they've already fought with themselves and made peace with walking away. Jenny's body language didn't say convince me. It said try me. And the scariest part for Sumit wasn't that she was threatening to go. It was that she wasn't asking him to come with her. That choice was his. He could stay with the safety of his parents, their house, their approval, or he could walk into the unknown with the woman who sacrificed nearly everything for him. But he couldn't keep pretending both were possible. Not anymore. Jenny didn't storm out. She didn't pack bags mid-yell. She said it. And sat back down like it was already decided. She'd done the math. She tried every version of compromise. Not the way she used to be, not the way she liked. When you feel like a guest in your own marriage, it's only a matter of time before you start packing mentally. Sumit would look at her and say, "It's temporary." But temporary became weeks, then months, then decisions being made without her. When his mom got upset, Jenny was expected to apologize. When his dad gave orders, Jenny was expected to nod. And when Sumit stayed silent again, Jenny was expected to understand. But understanding doesn't pay for lost time. It doesn't fix what's shrinking inside. Someone who used to laugh louder, move freer, speak more boldly. It wasn't about wanting luxury. Jenny didn't need a palace. She needed space. Her own space. A bathroom without whispers behind the door. A chair she could sit in without permission. A couch she could cry on without shame. She needed to breathe without asking for it. And when Sumit's mother got sick, Jenny did what she always does. She showed up. She helped. She made soup. She smiled. But this time, as she stood in the kitchen stirring lentils and rice, she wasn't thinking about kindness. She was planning an exit. Because sometimes when people keep forcing you to ask for permission, the only power left is to act without it. And Jenny knew exactly what she had to do next. She was going to tell Sumit's parents they were moving out, and she wasn't going to ask Sumit first. Jenny didn't bring backup. She didn't wait for a safe moment. She didn't ask Sumit to come with her or soften the blow. She waited until the soup was ready, then walked straight into that room and sat down with his parents like someone walking into court without a lawyer. Not because she thought it would go well, but because she already knew how it would go. And this time, she wasn't going to sit in the background while decisions about her life were made without her voice in the room. Sumit's mom looked weak, but alert. His father stood nearby, arms crossed. Jenny didn't smile. She didn't make small talk. She opened with calm, steady words. Something about wanting peace, wanting to avoid more stress, knowing that things hadn't been easy lately. Then she said the thing they didn't want to hear. She and Sumit were going to move back to their apartment where they were happy, where they had peace, where they weren't constantly told how to live. That's when the shift happened. Not in tone, in posture. His mother sat up straighter. His father leaned in. The warmth drained from the room in seconds. There was no "let's talk about it." No, "I hear you." No, "what makes you feel this way?" There was only a flat, cold reply from his mother. "You are not going anywhere." And that was it. A verdict, not a discussion, not even a question. Jenny tried again, this time choosing her words carefully. She said they'd done their best to adjust, that maybe it was better for both families to live separately. She even framed it as a kindness, a way to reduce stress. She used polite language. She didn't accuse. But for every sentence she offered, she got silence, then pushback. She said, "Feel." They said, "You must." She said, "We want." They said, "You will." It's not a conversation if only one side is allowed to speak and the other side is only allowed to obey. There was no space for her reasoning, no room for middle ground. Her words were being swatted away like flies, annoying, disposable, not worthy of weight. When she said we were happy in our own apartment, Sumit's mother snapped, "Happiness is not the goal. Family is the goal." And when Jenny pointed out that they were miserable now, his father said, "Then adjust better." They weren't hearing her. They were correcting her. The entire tone of the exchange was built on the assumption that Jenny's feelings didn't matter. Only her obedience did. It wasn't about logic. It was about control. "You will stay here. Because we said so. Because we are older. Because we know better. Because you are lucky to be here at all." Jenny looked at both of them and said again slowly that she was leaving, and again she was told no. Not "we'd prefer you didn't." Not "can we find another way." Just no. Like a child being denied dessert. Her life, her space, her need. All denied in one word by people who still didn't see her as family, only as something their son brought home and now needed to manage. And as Jenny sat there being told once more that her happiness was optional and her decision was irrelevant, she realized something cold and clear. They didn't care whether she was miserable as long as she stayed. Exactly where they put her. Sumit froze when she said it. At first, he thought he'd misheard. Then he laughed awkwardly. The kind of laugh you use when you're hoping the other person is joking. Jenny didn't flinch. "I already told your parents we're moving," she said, eyes locked. He didn't expect her to say it with that much force, not after everything she had already swallowed in silence over the years. Jenny stood perfectly still, her face unreadable, her voice cold and steady, and then she said the words Sumit never thought he would hear again, at least not like this. She was leaving. Not screamed in the middle of an argument, not thrown out as a threat to scare him into changing. This time she meant it, and the silence that followed was louder than any fight they had ever had. It was the sound of someone who was done begging to be chosen. For a brief moment, Sumit just sat there blinking, replaying the last few seconds in his head as if his brain could rewind and correct what he thought he heard. But Jenny didn't flinch, didn't soften her expression, didn't rush to explain or take it back. She looked straight at him and said it again. She was going. If he wanted to stay, that was his decision, but she wasn't going to survive one more week like this. That sentence hit harder than shouting ever could, because it wasn't emotional, it was final. People watching from the outside might think this came out of nowhere, like Jenny suddenly snapped, but anyone who had been paying close attention knew this moment had been building for a long time. You could see it in the forced smiles she wore around Sumit's parents, in the way her voice dropped whenever they entered the room, in how her entire personality seemed to shrink the moment they moved back into that house. This wasn't an impulsive outburst. This was pressure finally cracking after months of quiet erosion. When the dam finally broke, it didn't come with tears. It came with a calm, terrifying sense of certainty. Sumit wasn't yelling. He wasn't blaming her. But his face said everything. He genuinely thought they were managing. He believed surviving meant progress. He assumed that because Jenny had stayed quiet for so long, she must have been adapting. What he didn't realize was that her silence wasn't acceptance, it was suffocation. And now he was watching her breathe on her own for the first time in weeks, and that scared him more than any argument ever had. When someone stops fighting with you, that's when you should worry, because it usually means they've already fought the hardest battle inside themselves and made peace with walking away. Jenny's body language didn't say convince me, it said try me. And the scariest part for Sumit wasn't that she was threatening to leave. It was that she wasn't asking him to come with her. The choice was entirely his now. He could stay with the safety of his parents, their house, their rules, their approval, or he could walk into the unknown with the woman who had sacrificed nearly everything for him. What he couldn't do anymore was pretend that both were possible. Jenny didn't storm out. She didn't pack bags in the middle of a fight. She said it calmly and then sat back down like the decision had already been made. Because it had. She had done the math in her head a long time ago. She tried every version of compromise, every way of shrinking herself just enough to fit into someone else's comfort. When you start feeling like a guest in your own marriage, it's only a matter of time before you begin packing mentally. Sumit kept saying it was temporary, but temporary turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into decisions being made without her. When his mother got upset, Jenny was expected to apologize. When his father gave instructions, Jenny was expected to nod. And when Sumit stayed silent again, Jenny was expected to understand. But understanding doesn't give you back lost time. It doesn't repair the parts of you that slowly disappear. Jenny wasn't asking for luxury. She didn't need a palace. She needed space, her own space. A bathroom where whispers didn't follow her, a chair she could sit in without permission, a couch she could cry on without feeling watched. She needed to breathe without asking for it. When Sumit's mother got sick, Jenny did what she always did. She showed up, she helped, she cooked, she smiled. But something inside her had shifted. Standing in the kitchen stirring lentils and rice, she wasn't thinking about duty or kindness anymore. She was planning an exit. Because sometimes when people keep forcing you to ask for permission to exist, the only power left is to act without it. Jenny knew exactly what she had to do next. She was going to tell Sumit's parents they were moving out, and she wasn't going to ask Sumit first. She didn't wait for the perfect moment or bring backup. She didn't soften the truth. She waited until the food was ready and then walked straight into the room like someone walking into court without a lawyer, not because she expected to win, but because she already knew how it would end. Sumit's mother looked weak but alert. His father stood nearby with his arms crossed. Jenny didn't smile or make small talk. She spoke calmly about wanting peace, about reducing stress, about how things hadn't been easy lately. Then she said the one thing they didn't want to hear. She and Sumit were going back to their apartment, the place where they had privacy, where they had peace, where they weren't constantly being told how to live. The shift in the room was instant. His mother sat up straighter. His father leaned forward. There was no discussion, no curiosity, no attempt to understand. Just a cold, flat response. You are not going anywhere. It wasn't advice. It was a command. Jenny tried again, choosing her words carefully, framing it as something healthier for everyone. She didn't accuse or raise her voice, but every sentence she offered was met with resistance. She said, "I feel," they said, "you must." She said, "We want," they said, "you will." This wasn't a conversation, it was control. Her words were dismissed as inconvenient, disposable, unimportant. When she said they were happy in their own apartment, Sumit's mother snapped that happiness was not the goal, family was. When Jenny said they were miserable now, his father replied that they should adjust better. They weren't listening to her, they were correcting her. The message was clear. Her feelings didn't matter, only her obedience did. As Jenny sat there being told once again that her happiness was optional and her choices irrelevant, something clicked inside her with terrifying clarity. They didn't care if she was miserable as long as she stayed exactly where they put her. When she said again that she was leaving, she was told no. Not "we'd prefer you didn't," not "let's find another way." Just no. Like her life was something they had the authority to deny. In that moment, Jenny finally understood the truth she had been avoiding for years. She wasn't family. She was something their son brought home and now needed to manage. When Sumit realized what she had done, he froze. At first he laughed awkwardly, the kind of laugh people use when they're hoping reality isn't real. Jenny didn't blink. She looked straight at him and said she had already told his parents they were moving, and everything they had been pretending to balance shattered right there. Sumit felt the room closing in on him the moment Jenny said it. Not shouted, not whispered, just stated like a fact that no one could undo. He had already told his parents. The line echoed in his head again and again, heavier each time. 4 years, he had survived by delaying decisions, by hoping problems would soften if he waited long enough. But this was different. Jenny hadn't waited. She had acted. And that terrified him. He tried to speak, but nothing came out at first. His mouth opened, closed, then finally he asked why she would do that without him. Jenny didn't answer right away. She looked tired, not angry, not dramatic, just exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She told him she had spent years asking, waiting, adjusting, apologizing, shrinking, and she was done living a life where every decision about her future had to pass through someone else's approval. She said she wasn't leaving to punish him. She was leaving to save herself. That distinction mattered, because it meant there was nothing he could argue against. You can negotiate anger. You can bargain with tears. But you can't debate someone's need to survive. Sumit tried to explain that his parents were old, that they needed him, that tradition mattered, that this wasn't forever. Jenny listened without interrupting, which only made him more uncomfortable. When he finished, she told him calmly that she had heard all of this before. Temporary had become permanent. Adjusting had become disappearing. She said love wasn't supposed to feel like a constant test she kept failing. And for the first time, Sumit realized that the fear in her eyes wasn't about losing him. It was about losing herself if she stayed. He asked her what she expected him to do. Jenny didn't hesitate. She told him she wasn't expecting anything anymore. She had already made her choice. Now it was his turn. He could come with her or he could stay, but she wasn't going to live in limbo while he figured it out. That was the moment the power shifted. 4 years, Sumit had been the one stuck between two sides, constantly torn, constantly pressured. But now Jenny had stepped out of that triangle. She wasn't fighting his parents. She wasn't competing with them. She was removing herself from the equation. And that left Sumit alone with a decision he could no longer avoid. He went to his parents' room that night feeling like a child walking into punishment. His mother looked at him expectantly. His father's expression was already hard. Sumit tried to explain that Jenny was serious this time, that she wasn't threatening, that she was already emotionally gone. His mother immediately dismissed it, saying Jenny was dramatic, that she would calm down, that she always did. His father reminded him of duty, of respect, of sacrifice, of everything Sumit owed them. They told him leaving the house would be shameful, that people would talk, that family came before feelings. When Sumit mentioned Jenny's happiness, his mother cut him off and said happiness was selfish. That marriage was about endurance, not comfort. Listening to them, Sumit felt something twist in his chest. For the first time, he wondered if the problem wasn't that Jenny couldn't adjust, but that no amount of adjustment would ever be enough. Meanwhile, Jenny sat alone in the bedroom they shared, staring at the walls that never really felt like hers. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She felt strangely calm, like someone who had already crossed a line internally and was just waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. She began making quiet plans in her head. What to pack first. Who to call. How to explain without over-explaining. She knew people would judge her. She knew they would say she gave up, that she didn't respect the culture, that she didn't try hard enough. But she also knew the truth. She had tried so hard that there was nothing left of her to give. When Sumit came back to the room later that night, he looked smaller somehow. He told her his parents were angry. Jenny nodded. He said they didn't understand why she couldn't wait a little longer. Jenny nodded again. He said they expected him to stay. That was when she finally spoke. She told him softly that she already knew all of that, and that none of it changed what she was going to do next. She wasn't asking him to fight his parents. She wasn't asking him to choose her out of guilt. She just needed to know if he was capable of choosing her at all. The question hung between them, unanswered. For the first time in their relationship, Sumit didn't promise anything. He didn't say it would be okay. He didn't say he would fix it. He just sat there, silent, realizing that indecision was a decision too. And this time, it might cost him the woman who had built her entire life around waiting for him to be ready. Morning came without resolution. The house woke up like nothing had changed, which somehow made everything feel worse. Sumit's parents moved through the space with routine confidence, the kind that comes from knowing this was their territory and always would be. Jenny noticed it immediately. The way his mother rearranged things she had already cleaned. The way his father spoke about plans without once looking at her. It was as if her presence had already been mentally erased, like she was a temporary inconvenience they were waiting out. Jenny didn't argue. She didn't protest. She observed. And the clarity that settled in her chest was heavy but grounding. This was exactly why she had to go. Sumit watched her quietly pack a small bag, not everything, just enough to make her point real. Each folded shirt felt like a countdown. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would stop the momentum, but every sentence in his head sounded like another delay. Jenny finally broke the silence and told him she would stay with a friend for a few days. Not to punish him, not to force his hand, but because she needed space to think without feeling watched or corrected. Sumit panicked at the word space. Space meant distance. Distance meant loss. He asked her if this was really happening. Jenny told him it already had. He followed her to the door, glancing back toward his parents' room like a man afraid of being caught doing something wrong. That hesitation didn't go unnoticed. Jenny saw it, and it hurt more than anything his parents had said. When she stepped outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Like her lungs finally expanded fully for the first time in months. Inside the house, Sumit stood frozen. His mother emerged almost immediately, asking where Jenny was going. He told her she needed a daze. His mother scoffed, saying this was exactly what she meant about Jenny being unstable. His father warned him not to chase after her, reminding him that wives who leave always come back if you don't reward the behavior. That sentence hit Sumit harder than he expected. Reward the behavior. As if Jenny's pain was a tactic, not a reality. For the first time, anger flickered through his fear. He asked them what would happen if Jenny didn't come back. His parents exchanged a look and said calmly that life would go on, that family remains, that people who truly belong don't abandon their responsibilities. The message was clear. They were prepared to lose her. He wasn't. Meanwhile, Jenny sat in the back of a cab watching the city blur past the window. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't open. She needed silence. She thought about how many years she had spent explaining herself, justifying her needs, translating her emotions into something acceptable. And how none of it had worked. She realized something important in that quiet ride. Love shouldn't require this much permission. When she arrived at her friend's place, she felt embarrassment creep in. Explaining why she was there felt heavier than leaving. But instead of judgment, he was met with concern, with space, with a simple question no one had asked her in a long time. "Are you okay?" And for the first time, Jenny didn't automatically say yes. Back at the house, Sumit tried to focus on work, on routine, on anything that would distract him from the hollow feeling in his chest. But everywhere he looked, Jenny was missing. Her mug, her shoes, the quiet presence that had become background noise he only noticed when it was gone. His parents continued as usual, talking about meals, relatives, obligations. When Sumit brought up moving back to the apartment, even temporarily, the response was immediate and sharp. His mother accused Jenny of manipulating him. His father accused him of being weak. They reminded him of sacrifices, of culture, of everything he owed them. And suddenly, Sumit felt trapped in a way he never had before. Not between love and family, but between truth and comfort. Choosing his parents meant choosing certainty, approval, and control. Choosing Jenny meant uncertainty, conflict, and independence. And for years, he had chosen certainty. That night, Jenny lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another home. She thought about the comments she knew would come, about the blame she would carry. She wondered if Sumit would finally choose her now that she was gone, or if he would let her drift away quietly because it was easier than confrontation. The thought hurt, but it no longer terrified her. Because for the first time, she knew she would survive either way. The next morning, Sumit called her. His voice sounded strained. He asked her how she was. Jenny answered honestly. She said she felt sad, but clear. He told her his parents were furious. Jenny said she expected that. He asked her if she would come back if he needed more time. That was the moment everything crystallized. Jenny told him gently that time was the one thing she had already given too much of. She wasn't closing the door on him, but she wasn't reopening the cage either. She needed action, not promises. After the call ended, Sumit sat alone, staring at his phone. He finally understood something he had avoided for years. Loving Jenny wasn't enough if he wasn't willing to live like her partner. And Jenny, miles away, finally felt like herself again, even in the uncertainty. Because sometimes choosing yourself feels like loss at first, but it's actually the beginning of freedom. The days that followed felt heavier than the fight itself. Distance has a way of sharpening reality, and for Sumit, every quiet moment became a mirror he couldn't avoid. His parents acted as if Jenny's absence was temporary, an inconvenience that would resolve itself if ignored long enough. Meals were prepared without asking what Jenny liked. Conversations continued as if she had never been part of them. And yet, her absence filled every corner of the house. Sumit noticed it in the silence after dinner, in the empty space beside him at night, in the way no one laughed the way she used to. He tried to convince himself this was normal, that this was how things were supposed to be, but the lie tasted bitter. Jenny, on the other hand, began to feel something unfamiliar settling into her body. Peace. Not happiness, not relief, but a quiet steadiness that came from no longer explaining herself. She woke up without bracing for criticism. She spoke without lowering her voice. She realized how much energy she had spent just existing in that house. Friends asked her what would happen next. Jenny told them she didn't know, and for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel like failure. It felt honest. Back home, the pressure on Sumit intensified. Relatives called. Opinions poured in. Advice disguised as judgment flooded his ears. Everyone seemed to have an answer for what he should do, except him. His mother reminded him daily of what he would lose if he left. His father reminded him of the shame, the gossip, the disappointment. But no one asked him what he wanted. Late one night, Sumit found himself staring at old photos of him and Jenny, moments frozen in time when love felt simple and brave. He remembered how much she had given up to be with him. Her comfort, her security, her sense of belonging. And suddenly, the question he had avoided for years surfaced clearly. What had he actually given up for her? The answer unsettled him. Meanwhile, Jenny received a message she hadn't expected. It was from Sumit's mother. Short, direct, cold. It told her that running away solved nothing, that real wives endure, and that leaving proved she was never serious about family. Jenny read it once, then again. And instead of anger, she felt clarity. For the first time, she understood that no matter what she did, it would never be enough. The goalposts would always move. Her compliance would always be expected, never appreciated. She didn't reply. Silence, this time, was her power. Sumit called her that evening, his voice heavier than before. He told her his parents had given him an ultimatum. Stay or lose them. Jenny closed her eyes when she heard it. Not because she was shocked, but because she had known this moment would come. She asked him calmly what he wanted. There was a long pause. Too long. And in that pause, Jenny felt something settle. Acceptance. Sumit finally admitted he didn't know how to choose without hurting someone. Jenny told him softly that choosing to do nothing was still a choice, and it always hurt the person waiting. She told him she loved him, but she loved herself enough now not to disappear for someone else's comfort. She said she was going back to the apartment to collect the rest of her things. Not angrily, not dramatically, just factually. When Sumit arrived at the apartment later that day, he found Jenny surrounded by half-packed boxes. The life they had once dreamed of now reduced to cardboard and tape. He tried to apologize, tried to explain, tried to promise change. Jenny listened, because she still cared, but something fundamental had shifted. Promises no longer held weight without action behind them. She asked him one final question. Not whether he loved her, not whether he was afraid, but whether he was ready to live as her partner, not his parents' son. Sumit couldn't answer immediately. And that hesitation was answer enough. Jenny hugged him gently, the kind of hug given at endings, not beginnings. She told him she hoped one day he would learn how to choose for himself. Then she picked up her bag and walked out, not running, not shaking, but steady. Sumit stood there alone, surrounded by the remains of a life he hadn't fought hard enough to protect. And for the first time, the weight of his indecision fully settled on his shoulders. Because some choices don't come back around. And some doors, once closed quietly, stay closed forever. The aftermath didn't explode the way people expected. There were no screaming phone calls, no dramatic scenes, no public chaos. Instead, everything went quiet, and that quiet was louder than any scandal. News of Jenny leaving spread slowly through whispers, side conversations, and judgment disguised as concern. Some people framed it as rebellion. Others called it disrespect. A few even said she was selfish for choosing herself over tradition. But behind the noise, there was a different truth settling in. Jenny wasn't running away. She was standing still for the first time in years. She moved back into the apartment alone, walking through rooms that once felt cramped with compromise but now felt open, even with the